Hello, everyone. I am thrilled to have Adam Nemer with us today. And we are very new to each other, but there's something I said to you all often that a lot of us talk about like minded people. I believe in like hearted people. And that's my way to introduce Adam. And I'm going to let him introduce himself. Welcome, Adam.
Oh, thanks. So what a nice way to put it, Bob. You're absolutely right. Like-hearted folks. So I was a 20-year Kaiser Permanente CFO and operations executive. And 4 years ago, I started an organization to help leaders improve performance by normalizing the topic of mental health in their organizations. And I'm really excited. I wrote a book that just came out called Simple Mental Health. And I've just been on this new journey that I never thought I'd be on. This book tour concept. It's been a journey, Bobby.
Wow. Yes, I know. Just to catch everybody up, Adam just shared that he just flew in from one of his gigs. I'm so excited for you, Adam. And let me share with everybody why I'm so excited. I also often say to listeners and all I write that there's nothing soft about what gets coined as soft skills. They're actually the hard skills and they're the courageous skills that it takes for us to really make work happen and productivity happen. Yes, we're in the age of AI, but humans have to ignite that. And those human factors of emotional intelligence and what's going on with our emotions and mental health are so critical. And that's why I'm so excited to have you, Adam, especially with that CFO background, everyone listening. If you're at all a naysayer and going, hey, what's the real ROI? Adam has figured that out. So he'll talk more about that along the way. But Adam, let's just open up, my friend, with how do you define respect in the workplace?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this for a while. And if I had to come up with one thought around how to synthesize how I think about respect, it's about when you're fully listening and hearing somebody, and when you feel that you're truly being listened to and heard. I worked at a 200,000 person large integrated healthcare organization, mid-level executive, right? And what I saw constantly was people speaking over each other and interrupting each other and not really hearing and listening more. It's like we're waiting to hear, we're waiting for the opportunity to talk as opposed to listening to what the other person is saying. And early in my career at Kaiser, maybe my third year I was there, I had this really awesome opportunity to be the head of finance and analytics for our national labor negotiation. It was a developmental opportunity. In no way was I ready for this or prepared for this. All right. I'm like doing analysis. I'm in the back room of the largest interest-based labor negotiation in the history of America at the time, right? 80,000 employees. Anyway. So I had the opportunity to work for who was the executive vice president for Kaiser, a woman named Leslie Margolin. And she sat there and she modeled for me early in my career the power of listening, because she would sit there and listen to every single thing. She's the traditionally powerful person in the organization, right? And she would listen to whoever was in front of her, and you were being heard. I said, yeah, I'm learning from you how to listen. She goes, Adam, it is so unbelievably important. She goes, every week I facilitate our regional presidents meeting, and all they're doing is just, they're not listening. They're talking to each other. And I really believe a leader's core job is to listen to folk and get people to listen to each other and learn from each other, because then that's where you get the power of teamwork and collaboration. So it was really through the gift of getting to spend time with this wonderful mentor early in my career that I really developed this notion of, I'm going to listen. I'm going to let anybody talk till they've shared what they had to say, and really deeply listen from the perspective of where they're coming from, not just listening, waiting for them to stop talking. Does that make sense?
A lot of sense, Adam. It's very interesting that you started out with that. Yes, listening is such a critical aspect of respect. I've been revisiting the 4 levels of listening, the framework. I forget who's done it, but
Okay.
it's really cool. Yeah, we can pull it up later. But yeah, it gets to that. I think, and then the other thing that comes up, I say often on this show, is I'm reminded of Oprah Winfrey with her last episode of the 25-year show, which she summarized, said, look, I want to impart lessons I've learned from interviewing over 30,000 people on the stage. And that was her only monologue in the last episode. And she said, look, every single one of them, from the top most celebrities to everyday folks, had one thing in common: validation. Do you see me? Do you hear me? Does what I say matter to you? So what I heard you describe is a classic paradigm we face in the business world is I'm so busy. I speak in I statements. I'm very much guilty of this myself, that I'm so consciously or unconsciously focused on my agenda. That's the filter. And that's level 1 list, right? So deeper listening is when I can really turn that off and truly listen.
And it's when you get the greatest creative thinking and also your most productive. Think about all those times. I struggled with severe anxiety and depression that I didn't know about through almost my entire career. Right. And I found that one of my core problems at work, the way that showed itself, is I had a presenteeism problem. Right. I'd just be sitting there in meetings, nodding and smiling and having no idea what the hell was going on. It's like you've heard of absenteeism. You don't show up for work. Presenteeism is you're there, but you're not really there, right? And I would, it was, in terms of a productivity issue, I could be in a conversation with my team and have agreed to something that I had no idea what the hell I agreed to by the time I left. This happened all the time. And then I would cause havoc down the road because I didn't know what happened in that meeting I was sitting in. Seriously. And that caused my lack of listening, caused everyone else have problems because I, the leader, then later mucked around in people's business. So I can see this happening just all around us.
Yeah, I want to pause there, Adam. That's so big, man. Thank you for the vulnerability to share that. And what a wonderful lesson, because I think we're all guilty of that, right? If we're really honest with ourselves, I think we all face that. And let me connect this with.
And we know it when we see it too, right? You're in that meeting and that leader's not actually listening. You can know it in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Yeah. And it isn't even just the looking at your phone or getting distracted, but it's exactly that.
You ever hear that? Oh gosh, this is one of my dad's favorite quotes. That it was like the 1970s Supreme Court case on pornography. I don't remember the name of the case, but Justice John Paul Souter, he wrote a dissenting opinion in the case, and the case defined you had to define what was something pornographic or not. And in his dissenting opinion, what Potter Stewart wrote was, I don't know, pornography. I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it.
Yeah. No, we hear that all the time. And yeah, that's a drastic version, but we're facing it all the time.
And
let me connect
this same sort of thing.
Is Adam. Let me connect this with a topic that's very near and dear to me right now that I was just giving you a glimpse at around productivity.
Yes.
Let's play that same, stay with where you were about presenteeism. Yeah.
Presenteeism. Do you want me to define it a little more in detail?
Let me share the speed and then, yeah, feel free to
good.
riff on where I'm going with it. So, with all the hype about AI, and I'm a big fan of AI and I see great potential, what we're not hearing enough about is the human factor. Because just like with data, garbage in, garbage out. And so if the human is telling AI what it needs to do it at a level of quality and discernment to one, in terms of inputs, yeah, there's a lot being said about how to give prompts to these tools. But the bigger part that's not being talked about is how do you make sense of what you get back? Who's doing that discernment to say, is this really excellent work or is it mediocre? I'll give you a quick glimpse of my journey. I went from being a laggard in AI to being extremely excited about it. Just my productivity shot up with so many things I have it do for me. And then waking up to, wait a minute, you're wrong, and telling it it's wrong and admitting like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. We all are facing that. So my invitation to everybody, and it's very tied to respect for me, is slow down and catch yourself with what's the end game here. And I hope it's excellence, because every business leader is seeking excellence, which leads to greater productivity and outcomes for a business, right? So how do we really kick our game up? And yeah, that's I think very tied.
It's so for a living, I'm a professional keynote speaker and business coach, right? And so I work with businesses and industries all over America, Europe, and in all different sorts of industries, right? And the it's not the most prevalent topic, but there's not one conference that I speak at, not one client that I work with, where the topic of AI isn't top of mind for everybody, right? And it's almost always through that lens of, oh my gosh, what are we going to do, right? And then, and I, one of the things that I think a lot about, and I'm so blessed, Kaiser spends tons of money training their leaders in facilitative leadership, psychological safe leadership, how to lead change, change management 101, right? And when I think about AI, honestly, first of all, Bobby, I'm 50-50 if we're living in an alternate universe already or not. Okay. So let's just go clear there, flip a coin. I'm not sure. But if we're not, if we're actually living in a real world, can't believe I said that, then I don't think about this any differently than I thought about email when it came out, or my grandfather pulling his hair out when the fax machine came out in the 1980s. And it's the bloody change curve, right? And I'm sitting here trying to draw it on my little piece of paper here, but we all know the change curve. There's early adopters, and then there's laggards behind, and it's about getting folk. How do you get people to change, right? How do you get folks to become comfortable with change? And there's a science behind it. And you can approach AI in the workplace just like we approach so many other and every other change in the workplace. It's sometimes I think we get flustered by the shiny and the new and forget the foundations, the principles, right? And because no matter the technology, people, to your point, people are people and people do business with people. And that change curve that what we learned about grief, right? That same sort of thing. The seven, what is it? The stages of grief. The same thing as the change curve. They're related. And as leaders, remember that. Try to create those areas of psychological safety for our teams to be thinking about, okay, how do we take advantage of AI? How does this help us, opposed to be afraid of it? And to the extent that it does challenge us, what we can do about it.
Yeah, no, all of that's true, Adam. And what I'm contending with the framework I've created, the AI adoption mindset map, is to say that it's a classic quadrant map, but that early adopter is actually the scariest person, because they're the ones, back to my example, that are producing a lot, but they're not necessarily producing quality. They're comfortable with AI, they're jumping into it, but who's that person who's going to vet that and go, basically, there's a company called BetterUp and Stanford Media Lab have done research together to show that the cost of rechecking people's work is an extreme cost to businesses. So that's the connecting point. Anyway, the injunction to respect. So let's come back, my friend. Anything else around when when it's not there, and how do you bring it back on track, Adam, in a workplace?
First, I believe it's a leader owns culture. And that's the leaders that one of the few things they can't delegate, right? And so you need to express, model, and reinforce your culture is your core value. So as a leader, you express, monitor, and reinforce your core values. Then that's a big piece of it. Just as Leslie did with me back in the day, she told listening is important. She expressed and listened fully and hear what people are saying. Then she modeled it and she reinforced it by behaving that way in a manner. So there's to how do you know if folks around you are developing a team of that's listening or not? First, it's making sure that you're doing your job. You can't be monitoring if you're not a good listener to begin with and modeling that behavior, why are you monitoring this to begin with? Right. So the first is looking at yourself. And then the next is there's always I worry about folks who get caught into traps. Like I can tell you funny stories of people who smile and nod and they're not listening. Right. That's me.
Oh, we
Right.
yeah, I'm guilty as charged as well.
Because you're not there. There's the fallacy of if they're not looking in me in the eye, they're not listening. That's bullshit. Excuse my language. I get anxiety when I look at someone in the eye. You'll notice that through most of this conversation, I'm looking over here and over here. It drives people nuts. But I'm like, listen, when I look at you in the eye, I get anxiety and I lose track and I can't think of what I'm saying. I just,
Yeah.
so part of it for me is also asking, sharing and saying, so this is what I heard. And then asking, so what did you hear me say? And to me, that's if I'm always modeling that listening check. Hey, Bobby, here's what I heard you say for the last few minutes. Is that right? Am I hearing you right? And that kind of gives you as the leader permission later to say, okay, so what do you think about what I just said? How did all that land on?
Yeah, Adam, absolutely, man. And to know the way you're saying it and with the richness of experience you've had, that you're doing it with sincerity. A lot of those techniques, though, I think a lot of us in leadership and management have learned those techniques, and they too can be performative.
Oh,
that's why the respect quotient is about slowing us down so we truly listen to each other.
Being present.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to go through all the letters in the respect word, but the one that keeps coming up in this conversation is spaciousness. Is
which?
Spaciousness. The S is spaciousness is let's slow down. There's some things that you just can't rush and do in a 20, 30-minute meeting. The other thing I want to come back to, once like you just said, I'm going to end this piece. The piece you just said, I think before I added that, you said something really cool. Anyway, never mind.
So, but I'll share a thought with you. It's around how do you know when you're not being heard? It gets back to that Potter Stewart quote. So my experience as a leader has taught me over the years that there's certain things that we're wired as human beings to understand. For the love of it, maybe it's empaths. I'm an empath. And I believe that's a learnable and teachable skill. I believe that.
I got to interrupt. He just said he's an empath and he's been a CFO. Please take note of that.
Yeah.
Assumptions about such qualities of human beings that
CFOs they know are empaths.
Good.
They're the ones that aren't are scary. But my point here is that as human beings, just like we're recognize if someone's not feeling well, if they're sad or worried, we can notice these things. We are wired to know when someone's listening to us or not. So when you have to be really remarkably good to fake being a good listener and hearer over and over again. It caused me lots of problems in my career. That's where it gets back to that Potter Stewart thing. You look for the signs, but you don't overinterpret them. But as humans, we know.
Yeah. And you know what? Because you and I both work internationally, the piece that connects for me is around cultural differences. Like when you brought up the piece about eye contact, there are cultures where it's not respectful to look eye to eye. So I invite people to consider, is it me wanting to get to my comfort zone and not stretch to meet someone where they are, that asks me to have them do something that is comfortable for me? That's a huge place to just pause and really get curious to get to know each other. And then the other one is around globally, right? There are Aaron Meyer's work, Culture Map, and especially context, low context and high context cultures. Low context are very explicit, right? You say what you're going to say, you do it like in a meeting, you do the next steps, and then you do an email later. High context is at Samsung in her book. She goes, Korean leader says, why do you need to send that email? I told you I'd do it. Don't you trust me? And recognizing that difference, and at the same time in business, being explicit is really key. So I always encourage leaders that get curious, put the unspoken out there, check for clarity, check for assumptions, and then get everybody on track is, I think, very tied with what you're saying, Adam, around slowing down to listen.
And you can do all of that, and you can be explicit and clear and be kind at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm here. That's what Simple Mental Health is here to help share that message with leaders, is that we get greater performance from our teams when we show up as authentic, vulnerable, real people, not as that I'm the leader, get in behind me because I'm the leader.
Absolutely, Adam. Let's wrap it up, my friend, with your top tips, and please bring in your book. Connect the pieces with Simple Mental Health, your book, and your top tips for having more respect in the workplace.
As I feel blessed. I worked at a company that had such remarkably facilitative and psychologically safe leaders. The one that was the most powerful and perhaps the foundation of much of what I believe in as a leader, and why I wrote Simple Mental Health, why I do this work now to help leaders and normalize the topic of mental health, is that if we want to show respect, it's by showing up as ourselves. What people want from their leader is to be an authentic person and show their vulnerability. And if you want to create respect in the workplace, it's respecting your teammates and your colleagues by being honest. If you're having a bad day, say I'm having a bad day. Not always wearing that leadership smile. There's this phrase that I used to believe too, that you hear a lot. Leadership is lonely. I don't have anyone to go to. In fact, there's industries of organizations across the world where they get leaders of different businesses together because the leadership is, I can't talk about these things with my people at my business. I need to find other leaders. Everyone is expecting me to have the answer. I'm the CEO. I'm the leader, right? Leadership is lonely. And then I would see this manifest. I'll give you an example of how this would manifest in this massive organization like Kaiser Permanente. I'd get called into anyone will get called into a meeting. You got to show up in 30 minutes. You show up into this room of 100 people. There's a leader up on the room who's just above you, who's senior to you, who we've hit this massive crisis. Oh my God, we got to figure this out the next month. But we got this, no problem. We know how to do this. And everyone in the room was going, so freaking, what the hell is this guy talking about? Well, now, then we go back to our teams later that day saying, hey, I got to have this meeting, and we get everybody in. It was all the people below me. I say, we can do this. We can do this. Because and then it cascades down. And what you talk with, there's just these cascading of meetings where people are sharing this kind of message of I don't know where the hell we're going to do, but I can't say it because I'm a leader. I'm not supposed to admit that. That's the fallacy, is leadership doesn't have to be lonely. The beauty of this, the beauty is when you show up as a vulnerable, authentic human being, where you share your feelings and your emotions and how you break through that barrier of, I can't bring emotions to the workplace. I can't bring feelings to the workplace. Once you realize that is not possible, and actually by doing that, you improve performance, then not only does you're the performance of the organization and respect build and all of that build. But all of a sudden, leadership isn't lonely anymore. That was,
Oh, that's really beautiful, beautiful. So yeah, really the way I'm hearing that is the biggest piece of vulnerability a leader can model is the ability to say, I don't know.
yeah,
And turning it over to say, I'm really curious how you would solve it. And get the engine going on that, because that's where growth mindset really happens. It's, yeah, we've all got to be part of this.
or even more. No, I'm not. Yeah, or even more. I'm not so sure. I don't know how we're going to solve this at all.
Yeah.
But I believe in us as a team. And I've seen us time after time overcome obstacles. So, man, let's get some good ideas going and let's start working together.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
get
it's,
a structure for those ideas, right? Because ideas are only, worth pennies. But really, when there's a rhythm of how you go through those don't know what you don't know moments, that's really quite exciting.
it's
right.
bringing people on that change curve faster, right? So the whole thing, another way of tying it all together is as leaders share their vulnerability, it moves the change curve for everyone who works with them much tighter and faster and more effective.
Adam, it's been a thrill to have you, my friend. Thank you very much.
This has been so much fun. Thanks, Bobby.
Thanks, Adam.